And what I would like to do before we start the discussion is tell you very briefly the content that this document is going to have, and that should help you think about the types of contributions and messages that you would like to pass on today. And the document will cover the state of play, the robotics race, a different number of aspects, making reference to the work that has already been produced, but also the fact that the AI data hardware loop needs to be closed. The fact that there are some applications that will see more disruption than others, and in particular, the need for convergence with the supporting technologies that we just mentioned. So the document will focus on the specific challenges. I would say the focus is Europe, but we cannot ignore what is happening worldwide. How all these could contribute to making robotics more ubiquitous, more socially adaptable, deployed in more instances and having a bigger impact. And then go on through a state of the art and the international state of play to the specific technology challenges and cross links between the fields of robotics and AI with these other disciplines.
Slides not in presentation mode, so they can only see the first one.
They can only see the first one. Okay. Excuse me. Now I'm sharing the screen. So just a second. I'm sorry. I guess this might be what Rich was referring to. I didn't have the comments visible on the page. Oh no. Yeah. So as I fixed the PowerPoint issue, Rich, the document is for DG Connect. Now let's see. I do presentation mode.
Before you start again, recording.
Right now.
So Gregorio, before you start again.
The same. Okay. Moment. Go back on Teams. Teams. There we go. And sharing the presentation. Slideshow. Okay. Can everyone see the current slide with the document structure? It's working.
Yeah, now it works.
Miracle. Yes. Okay. Just 1 second, because what I cannot see though, and I would ask for help there, is the comments that appear. I think Rich had a question which he asked on the chat. I don't know if you had another question. Okay, so that's what we just answered. It's a document that's been produced for DG Connect. Okay. I was just a second. I think you can see the chat. There we go. Okay, and then the end of the document is going beyond what can be done in terms of convergence and crossover with these other supporting technologies, energy, materials, computing, and electronics. It's how we can work differently from the way that we have been working so far. To take into account the pace and the turbulence that we are living, in order to make sure that we don't fall behind in the race, but we don't take the wrong direction either, and we overcome the limitations which we already know of the European ecosystem, namely fragmentation. In order to make sure that we are well positioned. So that is, in a nutshell, the structure of the document. I will share now if I can move through the slides. Yes, it is working. So the timeline for producing the document. So we are today at the first milestone, which is the ICRA workshop. And as Philip was mentioning earlier, the way in which we will produce the document, and you can see that the end of the road for this effort is very, very soon. It's basically the end of the year. We cannot produce it in the same way that we would produce a traditional roadmap, which means that we need to find other ways of working that will be shorter. So today is the kickoff for engaging the robotics community. We are also engaging in one-on-one interviews with experts both in Europe and abroad. And we are also going to rely heavily on the work that has already been done by our colleagues, so as not to replicate things. The first draft of the document is going to be produced very, very soon, basically in the coming month. And then there will be some back and forth, because as we said at the beginning, this document needs to be then used by DG Connect in their production of what will be the final strategy technology roadmap. And that will happen at the end of the year, beginning of next year. Now, before we move forward with the different sessions, I think if you had questions about the process, we can take a couple of minutes and go through them. And what I will do is open Teams to make sure whether that I'm not missing them. It is on. Okay. In this case, what I am going to do, I'll go back to so how will this document will be aligned with the others in preparation that we mentioned. So Delphine, yes, we will send the slides, and for Rich, well, we're not starting from scratch. So wherever there is already something that's been produced, it will be used, and we are also relying on the ADRA topic group and exchanges with EU Robotics in particular to make sure that we exchange information throughout the process. So the idea is not to reproduce, but to fill in the gaps. And when we say filling the gaps, it's especially focusing on the links to other technologies and other technology development programs and how they can be put to good use. Okay, the screen just went black. It just went live again. No worries. It's all good. Okay. Should be able. About to run out. So now I'm again.
Your slide is stuck again. Your slide is stuck into the timeline. And your microphone is off.
However, what this means, just hold on, we don't have echo anymore?
No echo.
No echo, but you can hear us. Okay, we're back at full power. Thank you. Very well. Okay, now going back to the timeline. Now we are we're going to run through 4 different sessions today, and that is with the purpose of guiding our discussion a little bit. Bearing in mind that what we do expect that will happen is that the people who are physically present at ICRA especially, but it may also be the case of yourselves, they will not be available for the whole duration of the day, although we would love that. And I take the opportunity to remind that lunchtime, there will be a lunch offered during the discussion. But that means that if you can only join us for a little while, that means for one of the sessions, then don't miss the opportunity to contribute and to post information on any of the topics that are going to be covered throughout the day. Yeah. Okay. It's okay. It's okay. The power came back on. Very well. So we are going to run through 4 sessions, and in the first 3 sessions, what we would like to do is diverge. So what this means is we are not necessarily looking to enter into debate, but we would like to hear all of your views and opinions. And we do realize that when we get into things such as multimodal GenAI models and things like that, there will be diverging opinions. So no worries about that. What we want to do is to gather your inputs. And the last session, so in the afternoon, we will be working through this to consolidate the different inputs and to turn them into useful information for the document and for any other purposes of the people who will participate. Unless you tell us otherwise, as participants to the workshop, if you do contribute, you will be acknowledged in the work, and we will keep you in the loop of how the document is advancing. The first session is going to be Europe in a global marketplace. So the type of discussion that we are looking for at the beginning is the global perspective. When I mean global perspective is what is your view of what is happening in general and where things are going. And there is no harm in talking about Gen AI bubbles. That is fine, and there are things that we should capture already at this stage. So not just from a technological point of view, but geostrategic issues can come into place in this first discussion. International collaborations across types of actors as well, not just between research actors, and opportunities for partnerships. You can say things that you feel work particularly well, although I know that it's very human and very useful as well to say, to talk about the things that are not working. And also the role that international standards have today and could have in the future. In the coming sessions, we're going to talk more about the interconnections between the different disciplines. So you can feel free to comment on the links between AI and robotics, but we would also like your views on how other technologies, such as energy, because we've put batteries, but in reality, we're talking about onboard energy or wireless energy in general, and the consumption of energy relative to the numbers of robots that would be deployed, all these types of issues. How you see the linkages today, the silos that might exist, and opportunities, missed opportunities today, to actually help reinforce the position of the European Union in robotics and AI by making these other disciplines, I don't say it's not aligning them, but converging more with them. Then we will get into the thick of the technological discussion, and that will be during lunch, and then we will converge again. So if we start with the first discussion. Now, I was in hectic stress mode at the beginning of the workshop, Meishan, while you were giving the instructions. So I think you said people are able to contribute their ideas in writing. We would like to have them in writing. it's perfectly possible as well to talk. I think everybody has got a microphone that they can do that. What we would love is if we had both, and I think in the room, especially, there is no worries about having oral discussion, and it's sometimes more difficult over Teams, but we encourage anyone to pipe up. Just don't forget to write down the ideas that you are proposing, because these are the things that will be directly used later in the day and in the process in the coming days. As a way to kick off the first discussion, there are a number of questions. Then again, some of these questions, there's already information in the documents that we talked about at the beginning. But we would like to get your personal perspectives on where you see the field going, what emerging paradigms you think there are, any pitfalls regarding the general discussion and what is out in the open today. The types of partnerships in terms of research, academia, and industry, ways of getting robotics technology to the market today. The role of capital is also something that you can feel free to comment on. What things will look like tomorrow, and how you see collaboration across borders, because we tend to put a lot in the discussion. The Chinese bloc, the United States, and Europe, and the reality is that there are collaborations between these different blocs, and it's much more permeable. So also the pace and timing of development and collaborations, what you see. So how aligned you think the way of working is today with the international panorama and competition? What could we build that we haven't done already in terms of these partnerships? And also how you see the standards in both robotics and underlying technologies evolving relative to what is happening. What things we could push in this respect, and bearing in mind also the different application fields where regulation will go far beyond machine directives and preclude the application of different technologies in the short term. So how you see these things evolving. I think I have talked far too much today, and there will be candy for the first person to talk. I will get it to you there. And with that, I open the floor for the first discussion. Let's see if I can open Miro also in the other computer on my side. Do you have it open? If you can sit here. So I'm trying to see what's being posted on Miro. I think people are going around.
We're exploring it.
Also encourage to give your opinions by talking as well. Oh, this is interesting. I've never seen one of these things rolling out in a real time. Is there a way to go back in many things? Sorry?
Are we visible on this camera?
I think so. That's the camera. Although I see myself in the camera, is there another? Actually, no, I cannot see the image.
Presentation view.
No, we've got this one. Is it connected to the same computer? Because
Computer is it connected? So it should be this one.
Right.
Then it would be as simple
Well,
as
yeah.
now we are. Maybe we need to change the camera.
Yes.
Let's tell it.
Good.
Yeah, that's not the right room.
It's okay. It isn't.
This is. Ah, perfect. Okay. I cannot see, we only see the back of the room, but that's here.
The microphone will be from here as well. Okay, so we have.
So that's Miro.
Yes.
Saying their postings going on. Not yet. Yeah. Here. So that's going on.
People are having some problems with.
With Menti, but that means that they're putting in their inputs through
Try.
Menti there.
Yes. Yes.
Both things are possible.
Just slightly. Just for those joining online, there are a few of us in the room on this side and on that side. A couple of people have just left, and I think they'll be back shortly. But there is a little bit of few bodies in the room.
Are you showing it or
Yes.
you're still in the presentation mode?
No, it comes up on the Teams.
Okay.
I mean, to come in on this, because I think there's something that came up for me as being really important is, so, when we're looking at this kind of the friction between Europe and US and China and emerging economies like India, and there's a real threat, I think, from that is come out in numerous instances where you have the Chinese state heavily subsidizing some of these technologies, robotics and beyond, and then they flood the market. So the examples that you see in electric vehicles, for instance, is being repeated numerous times across different types of hardware.
With a very, very, very fast deployment.
With a very fast deployment. So like the example that I heard is that some of these robotics, the industrial robotics, they're being produced at 1/3 of the price that European competitors are able to. And so they're incredibly heavily subsidized. Europe competition just can't compete. And there's a risk here, because I don't think the Commission understands, and I'm not talking about DigiConnect colleagues, I think DigiConnect understand the issue, but when we're trying to raise these things to kind of the individuals who are involved in trade, that they don't quite grasp like how critical of an issue it is. So, farming, it's like basically number one priority. The electric vehicles, yeah, because it's difficult to not see the kind of thousands of vehicles that are amassing in different ports and stuff. But robotics, it's not really it's not really seen as a critical issue. And I think, I don't know, from an outside perspective, it's very difficult to gauge what that kind of internal thinking is here. And again, I think realistically, there's only one real option to try and combat this, and it's basically tariffs or taxes.
They have to be brought into the equation. Because at the end of the day, I mean, part of that debate is also obscured by the number of high-profile startups in humanoid robots that they are putting out there as well. When in reality, the real economic impact is on much more mundane but directly useful robotics right now. And the Chinese have always, at least the past few decades, taken a very long-term view. So I would say if they do agree with Elon Musk on something, it's on the long-term demographics and the fact that labor automation is going to hit their economy very seriously if they don't tackle that. And we know and we are aware of the same issues. That's for sure.
Maybe another aspect, as long as the majority of the production actually takes place in China, the factories there would most likely adopt more than Chinese robotics technology, also the industry robots, rather than importing something which at least is designed in Europe. So this is also a significant risk that I see, that just having the production still mainly there, this will foster the local robotics ecosystem. In contrast, we need to see that with European technology, the factories in Europe are still able to produce and maybe even bring back the production.
So that's an important point, because that's a basic question. So do we think that our role can be, as we have said in the past, it said, well, made by Europe, wherever it is manufactured using European technology? I think even with technological leadership, the Chinese would certainly still go for their own technologies, no matter what the advantage was. So in terms of industry or the manufacturing industry at the very least, that is an important point to take into account. So it's not making robots that can be used somewhere else, but we need to think about putting the right things in place so that they can be deployed here, including, of course, tariffs, not just economic home factors.
So, but what are some of the levers in that case to make deployment accelerate here? Because that's the whole point, right? So I think there's something here about, on a political level, to ensure that, politicians understand that, we're facing a demographic crisis, essentially. We have to do this because it's essential for global competitiveness. And we have to get over the fact that, we have to get over the kind of fear factor of robots as well, stealing jobs, for instance. But so how do you overcome those things? How do you look to stimulate deployment?
Bearing in mind actually that a lot of the actors that we are talking about are still not aware of this long-term demographic issue. And I've worked a lot in the manufacturing industry, and certainly the trade unions do not see the demographic problem coming. So we're still talking about replacing humans and things that are.
At least in the car industry, they are currently thinking about strikes with better working conditions in later this year, especially the German car manufacturers. That's the recent news from the last couple of days.
Despite the general trend in manufacturing outputs.
Yeah, but still, there is actually a crisis in car manufacturing, and let's say front-end companies like Volkswagen, Mercedes, and so on, they are not the only ones. So this falls back to the second level and third level of suppliers, and this is the chain which then the wave will come up in a couple of months only. Under the car manufacturers probably shrink down their production, then the other suppliers, they still have contracts and things to produce, but this will be a complete chain, which is very, very dangerous in my view. And especially as it was for decades now, export driven, and one of the main goals for the export was the Chinese Asian market in general. And I'm not sure whether taxes or customs, that could be just an escalation on both sides. Not sure what the best way is, so this is a really open question.
The fragmentation that was mentioned, and that reminded me of inauguration or acceptance speech of President von der Leyen the first time around. when she mentioned that in Europe we can do great research with money, but we have a hard time doing great money with the result of research. And I think in China there is not so much fragmentation in terms of policy institution. There is one beach in China, one institution that aims for getting deployment as fast as possible wherever possible. I think if we can create more linkage between where the great research is in Europe and the deployment pathways, we may win a little bit.
And now looking at this for out-of-the-box ideas, if anybody has it, is there any particular aspect where our fragmentation could be an advantage? Or it's a disadvantage no matter which way you look at it? I'll tell you what's behind my mind. It's the Neil Ferguson, the historian, the tower and the tower and the square said, well, usually independent actors that are networked should be able to react faster to changes. And one could say that if things are changing so fast, that should be an advantage for us. That's not what we see.
But also the cultural differences and approaching different kinds of problems, not only in manufacturing, but also for domestic robots, inspection robots, things like that. This might be something where Europe can be very strong, especially China has built up the infrastructure over the last, let's say, 2 decades maximum. And we have now the old infrastructure with a huge need of inspection and especially maintenance, repairing, and using this also as a driver and getting some advantage in this direction. This could, in this particular segment where we have also the market here, could be at least something which is one of the elements, but it's not enough.
That's a very good point.
All the sectors, in my view.
That's a very good point, and I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, highlighted already in the robotics roadmap. And so the fact that we have problems today that they don't yet have, that we can solve them already in the short term.
Yeah, there was also yesterday a couple of presentations around these inspection robots with different means, tactile approaches and whatever. But I think this will be market, but we need to find our European market areas where we are strong, and maybe the classical industry robot production might go to China, but we need to find our specific application areas and specific technologies. And I think it's also on the B2B side, not only B2C. I'm not sure whether this is the strength of Europe, but B2B, I think this is something which we need to address.
I was looking at IFR figures, and so B2B and B2C, they are, I don't know if I am going too far by saying that they're roughly equivalent, but you've got many more units at a much lower cost. When you begin to put in the fantasy of humanoid robots, which can do both, you can use it within a professional services or a home services. Then things get blurred, and I think I would tend to agree with you. So now we're talking about say the specificities, and I'd say that's the maintenance of infrastructures and the environment, or in general, so environmental services, robots, that does represent a particular point that should come out, and that is coming out in other.
Are there particular quality standards that you could apply to the imports from Chinese imports that would effectively ban them or make them basically obsolete?
That's a very good
energy
point.
efficiency, for instance. Could you make a certain level of energy efficient robot that is just?
If we were able to be a step ahead of them in that respect, in terms of energy efficiency of the robots, because right now, we're getting again into another one of the sections regarding the alignment with European values. I think if we go straight away into how the robots themselves are produced, it would be relatively easy to put up barriers, and I say relatively easy if there is enough will. However, for most of the world, that will not matter. They will still flood the market everywhere else, and we will lose competitiveness. If there are areas in which we could have a technological leap here in Europe that will lead to much more energy efficient robots, whether it is through materials or through even the average power consumption and the characteristics of robot operation. That's maybe something that's worth taking into account. By the way, we're talking right now, but if anything that we're saying gives you an idea, we're looking for rebounds and for writing it down.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Delphine. I agree with all what was said before. I just wanted to add something about sovereignty. I think it's important to have European robots, and it's more the case in nuclear application and also in defense applications. You were talking a lot about China, so I agree. I was also wondering about US power on this kind of application, IA4Robotics. What do you think about that? Google is a lot advanced for the development of technological bricks. What do you think?
It's a very fair point. I can comment. Other people can as well. But it's true that we do not see it in quite the same way. Perhaps because of the political alignment, or you could say we have a similar way of life. But that's it's. I would say that today, in terms of especially AI technology, the US is much more effective at flooding the market than the Chinese are. Thinking about Chinese AI startups and so on, they permeate less here than less. What I see on my side from Google, and having worked a little bit with them on the robotics part of Alphabet on these fancy projects that they had, I sometimes got the impression that the robot is an excuse for the AI rather than making both of them converge. Reinhard is frowning. Please disagree. Please. Yeah.
What Rainer and Carsten Krüger and so do at Intrinsic.
That's very true.
So this is something
that's changed.
Which is clearly addressing robotics in Intrinsic, but talk to Rainer himself later on today. He's here.
Yeah.
I'm just going to focus on a couple of comments, if I can jump in. I don't know if you want to just...
No, go ahead.
So just focusing on this, some of the comments that came in, some of the strengths. So strengths in mechatronics development. So is that a potential kind of lever to achieve some of the things that we discussed previously? EU support for cross-border partnerships through initiatives like Horizon Europe, foster cultural cooperation across academia and industry and government sectors, indeed. Academic expertise in universities, research centers, business. Then we have leading edge infrastructure like supercomputing centers and quantum computing initiatives support cutting edge developments and a strong industrial base. So Germany have robust manufacturing and robotics industries, which could serve as a foundation. And then if I come over to some of the weaknesses, so there's kind of the divided European markets, different national regulations and standards, which could slow the pace of robots and AI deployment compared to more unified markets like US and China. Absolutely. Look, there's another one coming, another weakness. So I'm going to start reading. Most of the focus on the supercomputing is distracted by the one big server model rather than addressing
Different types of computation, no fabric.
Oh.
Right types of computational.
Yeah, that's a very, very, very interesting point in particular, because we have not yet seen the age of hyperscalers in Europe, and get the distinct feeling that we will not see that. However, there is a limit to hyperscaling, and even in the United States, they are talking about these limits more and more in terms of energy consumption, in terms of the resources necessary. And so if you think about the evolution of how computing power can be put to use for whatever AI use we can think of in robotics, whether it is to design the mechatronics differently, the materials discovery. I'm not only talking about the models used in perception and planning by the robots themselves. No matter which way you lean, because we can, and I think we will talk a lot about that later in the day, going towards smaller, more specified or more specific, multimodal models, and rather than big monolithic things. The underlying infrastructure, it's not going to get cheaper, and that's understood by pretty much every actor today. And networking capacity is something that everybody will have to move towards eventually. The information that I have, and maybe that other people have better information regarding that, as concerns the Chinese, is that it is not so much networking as centralized capacity. And in the US, we're talking, of course, about very, very large data centers. I know that there are already efforts going on in Europe to move towards networked computing capacity, which brings its own particular challenges in terms of the means of communication between the different data centers and computing clusters that would be networked, their synchronization, the heterogeneity of materials. But then again, this is another challenge where we have this big challenge today more than the others. And taking that into account is, I think, something that's important, and will probably touch most of the other technology areas that we will look at today.
So there are a few more comments that I mentioned, and then I did want to just do a focus on the fourth point that you've got on the board here in a second. So we have the increasing explosion of the computational complexity, which requires a more active collaboration between hardware and software. We can turn the expertise of Europe into strengths. That's a good point. Most of the focus on supercomputing. Oh, that's we've done that one. Research, as it is executed today, often focuses on specific components, blocks, abstracting away other aspects. This is also a danger. Complexity, if you want to evolve to robust and safe systems. That's, I think, also a really good point. Public sector, and actually related to what I was going to mention. So public sector applications, smart cities, autonomous public transport, drone delivery systems are evolving slower due to stringent regulatory requirements, risk aversion and funding challenges compared to the US, definitely. So I just wanted to focus a little bit on the complexity and this question of standards. Any standardization experts in the room or on Teams? Because I think this could be quite an important one. But so when you look at the kind of interplay of the technologies and the requirements from standards, and especially when you look at the kind of application of GenAI in robots, right? Then the question of trustworthiness and explainability becomes, I think, increasingly a lot more important. because as others have made the point, Rich, you made this point, you definitely don't want your robot hallucinating. And so you need to be able to work out what it is that causes some of those issues. But is this a potential opportunity for Europe if we can get really good at navigating that complexity and trying to establish technical standards that go some way to clarifying these issues, and things like specifications for ethics. So if you can create specifications for ethics that also sit within that system, is that an opportunity for Europe? We have, the AI Act. It stimulated a huge effort in standards. Is this something that we should be establishing as a medium, long-term goal to trying to get ahead? And if so, how do we get people on board? Because I think that's the big struggle that the AI community have had. There's been very little engagement from industry, who you would imagine would have jumped straight on this right at the beginning. It's only now, after a 2-year period, that they've really woken up to the requirements here. So first question, is this something that could be used to our advantage? And if so, how do you get people on board? How do you make sure that there's a sense of urgency placed around this?
Having talked about this quite a lot with the industry in France, the general feeling that I got was there are parts of AI which can be deployed already, and we are getting to grips with that in terms of a perception. And all these things that will come later with ethics, we're still deploying robots in a much more limited way than the things that are being talked about by, on one hand, the GAFAM, and on the other hand, academia, and say, yes, so we see no urgency. This was usually the message that we got. I don't think that it's being helped by the big debates that we have seen very lately regarding regulation. And you see Americans making fun of Europe and say, well, you're good at regulating, we're good at innovating, and things like that. And I don't necessarily agree with their view, but I think today there's a big question already regarding things that, from a research point of view, you could almost say they are mature. It's just that they are inherently difficult to ensure in terms of trustworthiness, because of the black box approaches, because of all these things. So if, and I know many people who are trying to crack that nut, if we were the ones to crack it, then that would allow for new regulations that would take into account whatever method was finally useful for that. That's a big if. Then it could become an advantage. I think the problem today is that we are still not sure of what it means to ensure trustworthiness could be used in practice. Certainly not certification-wise. Yes. And I'm going to be really mean, because the Delphine Keller was brave enough to talk. And I happen to know and respect Delphine, and she's in industry actually, and leading robotics. And without going into the nitty-gritty of certification, it would be interesting to have your view on how you have seen in the past few years of the discussions about ethics on one side and future regulations from an industrial point of view. If you're still there, because I cannot see the people connected.
Yes, I am.
Sorry, Delphine.
It's a hard question.
But is it something in your day-to-day job in deploying robotics within production in your company, something that you saw far away? You just saw that there is regulation missing for some of the things, and therefore you will just not look at them in terms of deployment opportunities?
Yes, of course. I think there's a lot of job to do on that regulation topics.
And this includes also distributed robotics or distributed learning. So all these topics are also out of the loop in terms of what's considered by industry today. So we're still going on a robot by robot deployment, and we'll see later without taking into account the complexity of them interacting.
Yes, we are still in a R&D approach and not yet in an industrialization. I mean, yes, you're right. I think there's a lot of bricks that are missing. Yes.
The interesting thing I've seen is that the same message is what you get certainly from US industry.
Mm.
Not if you go talk to Google, for sure. Companies like Intrinsic that are trying to make a move to make sure that these things are more deployable and better integrated. But if you think about the manufacturing industry, for sure, there is also a big divide there. I admit that I don't know how far that gap or that divide exists in China, but I would imagine that there is less of a difference of opinion, but what is actually being deployed is not the same as what is being patented and financed in an upstream way. And when the real force in terms of standardization and regulation comes is when industry realizes that it's a short-term issue for survivability. The idea is, I get, is that we're not there yet. So we're looking around the corner, but still talking about tomorrow. And yet, if we think about the areas that we were talking about, because now we're talking about manufacturing, say, well, where are robots deployed today in an industrial context? But as Reinhard said earlier, well, where will these robots be deployed tomorrow? And you begin to think about infrastructure maintenance, for example, and it's even silly to consider just individual robots by themselves when you have to maintain an infrastructure. You are talking about systems of systems, and in some cases even swarms and things that are very far from being.
Is there a rule of thumb for maintenance costs? So is there a rule of thumb? Because I know that, for instance,
for maintenance of infrastructure.
Robots. So for instance, there's the military uses a rule of thumb where it's the cost of maintenance over the lifetime of a tank or whatever is about twice as much of the original cost. So is there a rule of thumb for maintenance of robots? Just wondering.
So there I was talking about robots for maintenance, but now maintenance of robots is a different thing. And if you begin to incorporate new materials and
maybe just one view. If you talk about the robot, normally the robot itself is 10 or 20% of the total system cost. So
the rest is integration.
Maintenance of the system, and this includes much more, and therefore I think probably it's impossible to get an estimate.
We have a hand raised.
Oh,
Rich.
Yeah. Should I unmute?
Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to go back to the comments about regulation and regulators. Something that's happened in the UK that's quite interesting is that we've started to find the regulators working together with some of the large infrastructure owners in particular to work out ways to pilot and scale the use of robots. So it's very obvious to anybody who runs large infrastructure that they're going to be using robots. They know this. They have no question about it. Their question is, how can they all understand it well, and how can they roll out that learning across their organizations so that they're not wasting time repeating the same kind of pilots again, and so that they're building trust and they're building models from that. So I think that work is being led by Samir at Birmingham, and it might be worth Reinhard reaching out to her and just asking her for an update on that and kind of including that in this, because I think that's a very good model of how things are classically seen as high-risk activities. Hey, let's fly a drone over a nuclear power plant, have been accepted by the regulator quite quickly and quite effectively, to the point where, hey, let's fly drones around nuclear power plants is now SOP for the UK nuclear community. Which
Okay,
is kind of
yeah.
Is NATS involved in that program as well?
Yes, NATS are involved, Network Rail are involved, the Rail Safety Standards Board are involved, the Maritime Regulator, the Coast Guard, Lloyd's Register. It's like that entire collection of people. The nuclear regulators, both of them, are heavily involved in this, because they all see this infrastructure needs this kind of technology, and this is something that they can push forward. The committee is called the UK RAS Standards and Ethics Committee or Working Group, for historic reasons. I'll send a link over. Philip, I'll send it to you. It's probably most useful there.
All right, thank you. Francesca Ferrer's just entered the room. I thought I should announce.
Thank you.
On the kind of regulatory side, yeah. So I think the reaction from the GAFAM, I think maybe there's some, perhaps there's something there about them being, that there is this question of like too much of a regulatory burden. But I think there's a genuine fear there as well. They don't want to change their current model of doing things. Their current model is suck up as much data as you can possibly find, even if that means grey areas where, that data wasn't necessarily yours for the taking. And I think there is maybe some concern in their mind that later down the line, case might kind of shake this out in regards to this. And I'm just thinking about the founder of DeMa, I forgot his name now, in the UK, the British guy, I forgot his name, who's now head of Google AI. I mean, he commented on this in an interview recently. He said it's like, if you specifically ask, your web crawler not to take your data, they might do it regardless of that. So I'm sure there are a ton of cases where they've just infringed on these rights, and I think they are a bit afraid that this will eventually kind of merge.
I had a personal patent fight with Google. I don't know how I won. I guess it was a clear case, but during that I saw that there were specific patents that were aimed at precisely that, at data gathering without consent. So that's not a surprise at all. I would say, coming back to intrinsic, and I know that we'll get a chance to talk to Raina later in the day. So the model is not exactly the same. It's been spun off and in a much more industrial way, but we still see the same platform where you work with your data on their platform and so on and so forth. So I would say it's still more aligned with that model, which plays on the American strength in the end. We are very good at providing services in exchange for data and then doing things with that data. And that's something that we in Europe have always struggled with.
What about taking things in a slightly different direction? But what I think there are these kind of higher kind of political questions that we need to be responding to, and I think there's also a kind of requirement from our communities also to put pressure on those political actors to kind of deliver on certain things. So the question of, for instance, injecting more financing into the ecosystem, right? Something that's absolutely critical to doing that is something like the Capital Markets Union. So today, I mean, we're on the train. We're like, oh, who owns Eurostar? So you look at the individuals who are here. SNCF, yeah. There's SNCF, But then you have a pension fund from Canada who owns a larger stake in the company. And that situation is repeated all over the show.
And it's one direction.
And it's one direction. It's all these North American pension funds have massive stakes and are earning an absolute fortune from European companies, including the tech sector. And this is something that I think you need to kind of balance. And I think as a political issue, it's got to be, up there as something that needs to be done. And I think, again, from our side, as a community, we have to be communicating those messages effectively as well.
And there is a basic difference in the way in which both financial systems work, which explains it. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible to protect ourselves from it. Also politically, but in the end, it's a matter of united political will there. And I had interesting conversations with the US venture fund, actually talking about Figure.ai. That how can someone say openly that it's going to take 30 years to reach their goal and still get a financing round that size? So, well, that's something that works because of the US financial system. That would not work in Europe. And I am tired of counting the number of startups. I think the last one was yesterday. I said, well, we did our first 2 financing rounds in France, and sorry to say, but it's US.
But imagine, but I think that's the thing. It's about delivering on the trust, right? Trust in the whole system. And if you get the capital working in a different way, the VCs will be thinking about Europe as a market in a completely different way. And the founders who establish themselves won't be looking to the US as a kind of, part of their scale-up plans, right? They would see it as a good place to do business, and they would stay.
Now, thinking about the task that we have at hand in terms of the priorities, I mean, right now we're talking as the robotics community.
Yeah.
I think this will be for later on in the day, but we cannot ask for an overhaul of the European financial system.
No.
I think what we could ask are for specific instruments that could help. I know that these things have been tried before, but if we can give a shape as to the scale and what types of things should be made available for it to work.
But I think it's about how do we contribute to that conversation constructively. Well, firstly, establishing the urgency around this, because I think it is one of those things that it's kind of one of those critical issues that needs to have some attention drawn to it. And then demonstrating as a community also what that means and what the potential is for this to Rich, you've got your hand up. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Yeah, thanks. So 2 things. First thing, I have said this before, and I will say it again here. Our current model of financing innovation in Europe breaks exactly at this point, because what we do is the first thing we do to somebody is we say, well, fantastic, you've developed this piece of technology, it's TRL5. Why don't you get a startup going and raise a bit of capital on the markets? And of course, as soon as you have an investor, they're looking for an exit. That's what investors do. They want a return on it. So as soon as you've given a startup the burden of being in the capital markets, you have ensured that at some point in their future, they will be chasing a return. And that means they will be selling to a larger organization, most probably. I think it's like 95% of SMEs of exits are through trade sales. So if the Commission continues to suggest to people that their model for developing a startup is to raise capital on the markets, then the Commission is guaranteeing a brain drain from Europe. And we should be very clear about this, because the figures are there, the figures have been there for decades, and the Commission keeps ignoring it. Secondly, there is another more fundamental point here, perhaps, and that is actually, why don't we say to the Commission that the focus on the political power of the capital markets over technology is a risk, and it's a problem, and it's an issue that the Commission can address. So there's an example this week where the three largest investment funds, where pretty much everybody's pensions are, BlackRock, Vanguard, and I forget the third, have essentially said they will vote down any ESG motions in corporate in shareholder meetings. So that's fantastic. So our pensions are now explicitly blocking ESG activities in large corporations. I didn't vote for that. No one voted for that. But because of the focus of capital, that is what will happen. So this is something that the Commission can actually act on, and it's something that the new Empower Commission could. And as technologists, we know it's a barrier to growth of startups, it's a barrier to growth of the industry, and it's a barrier to the broader uptake of technology, because let's face it, if it's all going into the large interests of pension fund holders, it's not going to generate the technology we need.
Thank you very much for that, Rich. And a follow-up question, because basically, rather than try to align with what's available on the other side of the sea, you're actually proposing that we go into our own very different direction. But there will still be financing needs for the work that needs to be done by startups to bring robots to market. Do you have an idea as to what shape that could take if it's not raised on capital markets?
I think this has been done a number of times. If we look at the large infrastructure projects that exist across Europe, for the most part, those are financed through the bond markets. They're financed through government debt. They're financed through creative sales of the value of the future value of the product. What we encourage is not that kind of financing. We encourage speculative bubble financing that is looking for a return and an exit, not long-term financing that is looking for a recurring royalty, a recurring dividend, or a recurring payment. That's the problem. We're looking for finance from investment funds rather than finance from banks. And we should be encouraging banks to de-risk this finance and take long-term views of the profitability of these things. That would then mean that you could have stable long-term finance in place and not bubble finance.
Rich, I wonder how you stimulate that, because I think that's exactly the problem with the way that the banks lend at the moment, right? It's very short term. You want to see a return within 5 years.
I think challenging the Commission to promote a long-term view of bank thinking and a long-term view of how we use things like European pension investments is a good thing for us to do. And we kind of don't have to ask the economists we don't have to tell the economists how to solve the problem. We have to frame the problem for the economists to solve. Because otherwise we're doing the classic mistake of we know enough to tell you your business. We don't know enough to tell you your business. I'm sure that there are enough people who are clever economists in the Commission circles that if it's framed well, they can say, okay, now we understand what the problem is, we can solve it, but we have to solve the problem.
Thanks very much, Rich. I just want to say we have 5 minutes. We have to finish on time because we have a bit of the agenda. But Catherine has her hand up. I didn't forget, Catherine.
Yeah,
but you do only have 5 minutes.
I just wanted to testify on this capital development big issue. I have my list of 5 French robotics companies currently, and I won't tell their names, but currently being, on the verge of being liquidated because at the time of where the maturity of the hardware is almost there, but not happening between, from the startup to the maturity that they can go into deployment, it's like 8 to 12 years. There's a rule in Europe about investment, and I'm sorry I don't know it by heart, but I will find the reference that says, that sets the investment to 10 years. And 10 years is not enough. So we do fund correctly our startups. When we don't fund enough and we don't fund enough the capital development in the long term, and then we don't fund enough when the product is mature, the deployment phase that requests a lot of money. So one of the most successful startups I can see worked is the one that from the beginning have industrial partners that are interested not only on the financial return on investment, but also for their business units. And I think we should properly incitate and incentivize industrial partners to be part of the round, because industrial partners like stronger equipment manufacturers that are not necessarily in robotics. The vertical, like, we have strong logistics robotic companies. We should have logisticians that are big logisticians in Europe, like CMA, CGM, or whatever, let's make the list, to create a dedicated fund for robotics equipment. And then we can back it up with a European fund or state funds, and then have the long-term capital development that we need. Yeah, honestly, it is the biggest problem. That's why we do have a great entrepreneurship and not a new, very strong technological companies that of any size, or why we lose them on the way towards Americans or Chinese, actually. The other things that I wanted to say, like I hear about China, let's not forget Japan is the all-time leader and currently unparalleled leader in industrial robotics.
Thank you very much,
That was
Catherine.
it. That was my
I think we
contribution on the
have very little
questions.
time, but I still wanted to ask you a follow-up question. Because when you were talking about the possibility of having industrial funds, what I understood is you were talking about having funds that would help in the deployment phase when the companies need to scale up to put it out into the market in large numbers, and the type of capital
And
they need is no
also
longer
into
available.
not just
And
into
traditionally,
the TRL, let's say TRL 6 to 8 after the first 5 years. It takes 8 to 12 years. It takes 8 to 12 years from the startup. I've got a great idea, I've got a great piece of technology, and etc. It takes 8 to 12 years, and we stop after 5. So we're killing the companies when they finish demonstration, proof of concepts, we're killing them, or they become foreigners. So we need to have funds that are patient and industrial, people involved in hardware. Understand.
Rather than the industrial funds that we have seen in the past few years that have invested more in the early stage startups for the proof of concept, abandoning them later.
Well, that we can do, that the state does, that traditional investor do. Their way out is to sell to an industrial partner. And the best way is to have the industrial partner to start. I can talk about one additive manufacturing company called Srideus. I have no problem saying that. From the beginning, they have a world leader in materials as an industrial partner. These ones, I bet they will succeed in scaling up and staying in Europe. You need industrial partners, people that understand hardware, that are ready to be patient, and not, or you take them when the company is at TRL 5, and then they have 5 years to go. But the 10 years limitation of Europe is killing so many companies. It's terrible, and the lack of fund comes from the lack of industrial partners going into startups, but not following up. I have so many projects of innovation where I've got letters of, oh, it's a great product, I want this product, and etc. And they don't put any penny into the project. They just look at the SME or the startups struggling to get their product to a maturity.
Sure.
Waiting
And maybe an
for
interesting thought would be if this can be done at European scale rather than the industry of each country.
Of course, and the funds of the currently in France, I can say the strongest companies, what they do is they invest in funds and those funds invest in startups. The companies should invest directly into the companies, the startups, or at a later stage that they create a capital development fund, and that can be backed up by a European state fund or a European financial fund. And
Thank
then
you
the
very, very
exit,
much, Catherine.
right. The exit exists. The exit is like it's integrated into the big company. They subsidized it and make lots of money, or we go to the stock exchange, and nobody talks about how we can, forward plan that those
Thank you. Just
companies can go to
one
the
thing,
capital
Catherine.
market.
We're going to break out, but we will be back in 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, and
Coffee time.
Remember the question.
and yes. No, keep that in mind. We're going to keep the line open.
Yeah.
So and at 11:45 we will get. We will move more into the discussion of how the different communities and disciplines are working together today, and what we could dream could be better in this respect. Thank you very, very much for the wonderful discussion, and I see that you wrote a lot of stuff as well. So that's all going to be useful. See you in 15 minutes then. It's not unmuted. I need to look very clearly. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Hello all, just to say we are going to be making our way into the room. We'll be starting in a minute or two. Thanks again for your patience. Okay. Hello, everyone. We're just about to restart, but we have a request. And that is, would it be possible for everybody to turn their cameras off, or for at least those who feel comfortable doing so?
And are
so
not
that we
wearing
can-
pajamas.
And that aren't wearing pajamas, just so that we can take a group photo with everybody in the room, and so we can post it. Is that okay?
Yay!
Thanks, Catherine.
Wonderful.
That's priceless.
And rich.
I'm
Trying to be pretty.
Maya, maybe you can, if more people come on, take a picture of that or screenshot it on this.
Good,
Just
thank
a few
you.
minutes.
Yeah,
Can you?
right, so we're just gonna do a quick photo, come on.
If you want to
Gemma,
record it from-
Maxine, we're gonna go to.
I mean, you can do it while the other person is talking, but just.
Yeah, I just want to take it together with that. It's
Let's get in there, but
Yeah.
thanks very much, everyone.
So I'm taking, I can take it also, whichever, I can take it.
Come over here, we'll get there. We'll just be a minute.
Just be a minute and then. Yes, everybody together.
It's here and we make
I would want
space.
Philip to be on the other side.
We can do a little logo to.
Yes,
You have some here.
sure. Is everybody else in pajamas?
Great.
What a brave new world.
All right, everybody ready?
I love the gender.
Yes.
Please come here.
I can come just for the gender.
Yes, I will.
Just for the gender.
Just for the gender, that's my only.
All right, guys.
Okay.
Go. I can figure out how to use camera on this. Okay. All righty. Thank you. Big smiles, everybody. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, okay. Thank you. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, perfect.
Great, thanks so much.
Thank
For
you.
the gender.
Okay.
And for everybody else, please note that your photos will be added from your LinkedIn profile.
So,
Yeah, let's continue.
Let's show up again. And I'm going to share in to put a PowerPoint. Time. Yeah, I need slideshow mode and then share.
If you go to the Teams